Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
My place isn't deep in the woods, but it's close enough. The back of my property just opens right up into this national forest. I'm not going to say which one, for privacy. I've always been a pretty grounded guy. Never really bought into all that supernatural stuff, ghosts, demons, heaven, hell, monsters under the bed. To me, it was just stories people told to scare themselves or make sense of things they couldn't explain. I dealt with facts, with what I could see and touch. That was my world. For years it was just me and the trees out here, quiet. Then a few years back a bunch of the land around me got sold off. Developers came in, bulldozers roaring, and before you knew it, there was this whole new neighborhood. Rows and rows of those identical cookie-cutter houses, all part of some WA, homeowners association. I was completely separate from them, thankfully. My property lines were clear. My taxes paid, and I had nothing to do with their committees or their rules about lawn gnomes. I liked it that way, kept to myself and they kept to themselves. Or at least that's how it was until recently. It started with a missing person report from the WA. A guy named Michael Brown lived 3 streets over from the edge of my property. Nobody thought much of it at first. People go missing, sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. But then, a few days later, his body was found. Not far from my house actually, just inside the tree line of the national forest. I remember the sirens, the flashing lights painting the trees red and blue in the early morning fog, police cars, crime scene vans, even a couple of news trucks trying to sneak past the blockade. It was a big deal. The kind of thing that makes the quiet kind of people like me sit up and pay attention. The official word came down pretty fast. Animal attack, the police said. Quite savage. They talked about a bear, maybe a pack of wolves. I heard it on the local news, saw the sound bites from the sheriff, a man named Sheriff Thompson, looking grim. He stood there, microphone in hand, talking about the dangers of living so close to nature, how these things happen. But I knew better. I'd lived here for 20 years. There were no bears in this part of the forest, not for 100 miles. And wolves, not a chance. Maybe a stray coyote, sure, but nothing that could do that kind of damage, not to a grown man. I saw the pictures, the ones the local paper accidentally leaked before they pulled them. It wasn't just a mauling, it was something else. It looked like someone had tried to tear him apart. My gut twisted. This wasn't an animal, this was something else entirely. The neighborhood, the WA, they were all spooked. You could feel it even from my detached little bubble. People stopped letting their kids play outside. Dogs weren't walked in the evenings. Everyone started locking their doors earlier, but then things really started to spiral. More bodies, not just hikers or people who had wandered into the woods. These were people plucked right out of their homes. John Johnson, a retired teacher, gone from his living room. His wife Linda found screaming in the kitchen, barely alive, babbling about shadows and claws. She didn't last the night. Then, a week later, little Jillian Young, 7 years old, vanished from her bedroom while her parents were downstairs watching TV. The woods, which had always been a place for walks and quiet contemplation, were now heavily avoided. People looked at the tree line like it was a gaping maw, ready to swallow them whole. The police were stumped. Sheriff Thompson was on TV almost every night, looking more and more tired. He kept repeating the animal attack theory, but even he sounded like he didn't believe it anymore. They brought in forensics teams, FBI agents, even some wildlife experts from the state. Nothing, no tracks, no fur, no definitive proof of any animal. And the weirdest part, every single time there was an attack, the security cameras in the immediate vicinity always blacked out. Always. A power surge, a glitch, a coincidence. That's what they said. But it happened too many times. That's when my own theory started to solidify. This wasn't some wild beast. This was a person. A very smart, very organized person. Someone who knew how to disable electronics, how to move silently, how to strike and disappear without a trace. A tech-savvy serial killer. It made sense to me. It explained the camera blackouts, the lack of animal evidence, the way people were being taken from their homes. It was terrifying, yes, but it was explainable. It was human. And if it was human, I could fight it, I could prepare. So I went all in. I spent a small fortune on cameras, not just the cheap ones. High definition, night vision, motion activated, battery backup, solar powered, redundant systems. I hung them everywhere. Along my fence line, deep into the forest on my property, pointing at every window, every door. I even got a drone with a thermal camera just to scout the perimeter every night. I set up monitors in my living room. A whole wall of screens showing every angle of my property, every shadow, every rustle of leaves. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. I wasn't going to be another victim. I was going to catch this person. I was going to prove my theory. I spent my nights watching. My eyes burned, my coffee consumption went through the roof. Every twitch of a squirrel, every gust of wind made my heart pound. I saw deer, raccoons, the occasional fox. Nothing human, nothing out of place. Days turned into weeks. The attacks continued in the WA, but nothing touched my property. I started to feel a perverse sense of smugness. My cameras, my vigilance, it was working. I was safe, I was smart. Then came the night of the storm. The wind howled like a banshee, rain lashed against the windows and the trees groaned under the assault. Power flickered, but my camera system, with its multiple backups, stayed online. I watched, a strange calm settling over me. This was the perfect cover for a killer. And then, on one of the screens, a flicker. Not a blackout, a distortion. Like old TV static, but localized to a single camera feed. The one pointed directly into the deepest part of the forest behind my house. It lasted only a second, then cleared. I rewound the footage, my fingers trembling. The static appeared again, and in that brief, distorted moment I saw it. Something tall, impossibly thin, moving with a speed that defied logic. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. My breath caught in my throat, my rational world, my carefully constructed theories shattered into a million pieces. I was wrong, so wrong. And I had a feeling, a cold, creeping dread, that it was going to cost me everything. That flicker on the screen, that impossible shape, it burrowed deep into my brain. I replayed it 100 times, pausing, zooming, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch, a trick of the light, a branch swaying in the storm, but every time the same tall, impossibly thin outline shimmered into view, moving too fast, too unnaturally, to be anything I knew. It wasn't human, it wasn't an animal, and that realization, it just froze me solid. My stomach dropped like I'd just stepped off a cliff. All my theories about a tech-savvy killer, about logic and reason, they just crumbled. I sat there, staring at the monitors for hours. The storm eventually died down, leaving behind a dripping silence. The sun started to peek through the trees, casting long, eerie shadows. I hadn't slept a wink. My head throbbed, and a cold sweat clung to me. What the hell did I see? And if it wasn't human, what was it? My mind raced, jumping from one insane idea to another. Some kind of new species, a deformed animal, but the way it moved, it just wasn't right. It defied physics. Later that morning, the news channels were buzzing again. Another body. This time, it was Patricia Harris, a young woman who lived right at the edge of the WA. Practically neighbors with the guy who went missing first. Her house was just a few hundred yards from my property line. The police were already swarming her street. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sound that was becoming far too familiar. I watched from my window, hidden by the trees, as Sheriff Thompson's patrol car pulled up. He looked even more haggard than before, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks either. I knew I had to do something, but what? Tell them I saw a blurry, impossible figure on my security camera? They'd think I was crazy, that the stress had finally gotten to me. I had always prided myself on being rational, on being a man of facts. But what I saw defied every fact I knew. Still, I had evidence. Even if it was just a few frames of distorted video. I decided to start small. I called the non-emergency police line. "My name's John Smith," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I live adjacent to the National Forest, near the new WA development. I've got a pretty extensive security camera system, and I think I might have captured something relevant to the recent incidents." The dispatcher, a tired-sounding woman, took my information. "We'll send an officer out when one's available, sir. Could be a while." "It's important," I insisted. "I think it could be a break in the case." She sighed. "Sir, we're very busy right now. We'll get someone there." Hours later, a patrol car finally pulled into my long gravel driveway. It was Officer Davis, a young guy I'd seen around town, barely out of the academy. He looked nervous, kept glancing at the tree line. "Mr. Smith, thanks for calling us. What have you got?" I led him inside, my heart pounding. "I've got cameras all over my property, officer. After the first few incidents, I wanted to be extra careful. I got this new system, really high-tech, and last night during the storm, something showed up on one of the feeds. I played the clip for him, the one with the distortion, the blurry, elongated figure." Officer Davis stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. What is that, sir?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It looks like static interference. Look closer," I urged, pointing at the outline. "It's there for a split second, moving too fast, too wrong." He leaned in, then shook his head. "Honestly, Mr. Smith, it's too blurry. Could be anything. A branch, a shadow, just the rain messing with the signal. We've had a lot of power issues lately." He straightened up, avoiding my gaze. "Are you sure you're seeing something here that isn't just a trick of the light?" His skepticism was clear. It stung, but I expected it. How could I blame him? I couldn't even convince myself. "I know what I saw," I said, my voice firm. "And I know what I didn't see, and that wasn't a branch or a shadow. It was moving with intent." He scribbled something on his notepad. "All right, Mr. Smith, I'll make a note of it. We'll pass it up the chain, but honestly it's not much to go on. We're still looking for human perpetrators or a large animal." He lingered for a moment, then added, "You should probably secure your house even more, sir. Stay inside, it's not safe out there." He left, and I could tell he thought I was either seeing things or desperate for attention. The next day, the HOA had an emergency meeting. I heard about it from my neighbor, a busybody named Emily Adams who loved to gossip. I usually avoided those things, but this time I felt compelled. Maybe I could warn them subtly. The community center was packed. People looked terrified. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with fear. You could feel the tension in the air like a live wire. Everyone was whispering, eyeing the doors, jumping at every little sound. Stephen White, the HOA president, a balding man with a perpetually stressed expression, stood at the podium. "We understand everyone is frightened," he began, his voice shaky. "We're doing everything we can. We've increased private security patrols. Though, as you know, they can't go onto private property or into the national forest. We're working with the police, pushing for more resources." "More resources for what?" a woman shouted from the back. "To tell us it's a bear that doesn't exist? My niece is gone. What are you actually doing?" That was the aunt of little Jillian Young. Her voice cracked with grief and anger. "We're installing more streetlights," Stephen continued, ignoring her. "We're looking into community watch programs." That's when I spoke up. "Excuse me, Mr. White. I live right next to the forest. I've got high-end cameras, and I think what we're dealing with isn't what the police are telling us." All eyes turned to me. Stephen White looked annoyed. "And who are you, sir?" "John Smith," I replied. "I'm not part of the HOA, but this affects us all. I saw something last night on my cameras. Something unexplainable. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't human." A murmur went through the crowd. Someone scoffed. "He probably saw a shadow," a man muttered. Stephen cleared his throat. "Mr. Smith, we appreciate your vigilance, but we need to stick to facts. The police are investigating. We don't need to spread further panic with unsubstantiated claims." Unsubstantiated? I felt a surge of anger. People are dying, children are disappearing, and the police can't explain it because they're looking for the wrong thing. I raised my voice, desperate to make them understand. "The cameras always black out for a reason. There's something out there that knows how to avoid detection. Something that isn't just a regular killer." A few people looked intrigued. A few more looked at me like I was insane. Timothy Walker, a stern-faced man who was on the HOA board, stepped forward. "Mr. Smith, with all due respect, we have enough fear. We need solutions, not wild speculation." "What exactly did you see that was so unexplainable?" He emphasized the word, making it sound like a joke. I hesitated. How could I describe it without sounding completely unhinged? It was a distortion. A tall, thin figure moving at impossible speed. It was gone in a blink. Laughter erupted from a few people. Stephen White shook his head. "Folks, please. We need to remain calm and focus on practical measures. Mr. Smith, while we appreciate your concern, we can't base our security measures on what might be a camera malfunction." I felt defeated. They didn't believe me. How could they? My own eyes struggled with what they saw. I walked out of that meeting, the whispers following me. They thought I was a crackpot. That night I watched my monitors again, more intently than ever. I zoomed in on the area where I'd seen the thing. Nothing. Just trees, shadows, the occasional deer. I kept replaying the clip, trying to find more, some detail I'd missed. And then, as I watched the playback on a loop, I noticed it. Not on the screen where the figure appeared, but on a different camera feed. One that looked down my driveway towards the road. A feed I usually ignored unless someone was approaching. Earlier that morning, just after Officer Davis had left, a black, unmarked SUV had driven slowly past my driveway. It stopped briefly, then moved on. I hadn't thought anything of it then. Maybe someone lost. But now, seeing it again, a cold dread crept up my spine. The SUV had tinted windows. I couldn't see who was inside, but it had stopped exactly when Officer Davis was walking to his car. And then, as the SUV drove away, I saw something else. A faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, just at the very edge of the frame, near where the SUV had paused. It was the same kind of distortion I had seen in the woods, briefly. Like a ripple in the air, my blood ran cold. Was I being watched? Was this SUV connected? Had Officer Davis? No, that was crazy. He was just doing his job. But the shimmer, the timing, it couldn't be a coincidence. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just about something in the woods anymore. Someone or something was watching me, and it knew I had seen it. The image of that black SUV, coupled with the brief distortion at the edge of my property, burned itself into my mind. It was a cold, calculated thought that settled deep in my gut. I was being watched, and not just by some unknown creature in the woods, but by something connected to it. Something human, or at least human-looking, that was trying to keep tabs on me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about being targeted. My initial anger at Officer Davis for dismissing my video quickly turned into a chilling suspicion. Had he really not seen anything, or had he been told not to see anything? Was the SUV some kind of surveillance? A shiver ran down my spine. The more I thought about it, the more tangled everything became. The official story, the blacked-out cameras, the lack of animal evidence, and now this. It felt like a net slowly closing around me. I spent the next few days in a heightened state of paranoia. Every car that passed on the road, every distant sound from the woods, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I barely left the house. My monitors became my world, a glowing wall of surveillance. I analyzed every frame, every pixel, looking for any anomaly, any hint of that distortion again. The drone flew its nightly patrols, its thermal camera sweeping the tree line. Nothing. It was like whatever I had seen, both the creature and the SUV, had vanished into thin air. But the fear in the WA neighborhood was still very real. People started putting up their own security cameras, mostly the cheap kind you could buy at any electronics store. They also formed neighborhood watch groups, men and women walking the streets in pairs, flashlights cutting through the darkness. It was a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to feel safe, but I understood it. They needed to do something. One afternoon I saw a familiar face walking along the road close to my property line. It was David Williams, a burly guy from the WA, part of one of those new watch groups. He had a big flashlight clipped to his belt, and was peering into the woods with a worried look. I decided to try again. Maybe I could get through to someone who wasn't an official. I stepped out onto my porch, keeping my voice low. "David," he jumped, startled, then squinted at me. "John, didn't see you there. You really ought to trim those bushes." He tried to sound light, but his eyes darted nervously. "Have you seen anything unusual out here?" I asked, cutting straight to it. "Anything at all?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Unusual? Everything's unusual now, John. We found a dead deer this morning just a few yards in from the Johnsons' place, all torn up just like the people. But the police said it was, probably a coyote or something." He kicked at a loose stone. "A coyote that can take down a full-grown deer and leave it looking like that? I don't know, man. It's messed up, and the cameras," I pressed. "Did any of your group's cameras catch anything?" He shook his head. "Same story. Every time they just go dark. For a minute, 2 minutes, then they come back on. It's like something out there knows exactly where they are and how to turn them off. It's creepy. We've even tried battery backups, but it doesn't matter. Still goes out. That's what I've been saying," I told him, feeling a spark of hope. "It's not an animal. It's something else, something intelligent." David rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, intelligent doesn't exactly make me feel better, John. The thought of some nutjob out there doing this, or something worse. My wife, Mary, she wants us to move. But where do you even go when something like this is happening?" He paused, then leaned closer. "You know, some of the folks are talking, old legends, about the forest, things that live in the shadows." He shivered despite the warm afternoon. "Legends aren't going to help us," I said, trying to steer him back to logic. Even though my own logic was fraying at the edges. "We need to find out what it is and how it's doing this." "I saw something, David. Something that shouldn't exist." I almost told him about the distortion, but I held back. "Not yet." He just nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Whatever it is, John, it's getting bolder and faster. We had another incident last night. Nobody reported it publicly yet. Robert Jones. His whole back door was ripped right off its hinges. He's lucky he was sleeping in the basement. He said he heard a faint scratching like long nails on wood, then a splintering crash. He called the police, but they found nothing, just the damaged door." My blood ran cold. A faint scratching like long nails on wood. That description, it clicked with the impossibly thin figure I'd seen. It was getting closer, trying to get into homes. This wasn't just random attacks anymore. This was a sustained, growing threat. I went back inside, my mind racing. The scratches, the blackouts, the speed, it all pointed to something that could manipulate its surroundings. And then the SUV, the one that had paused outside my house, it had to be connected. Someone was monitoring the situation, maybe even protecting this thing. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Sheriff Thompson. "Mr. Smith," he said, his voice flat, "we'd like you to come down to the station. We have some questions about your property and your camera system. Bring any footage you deem relevant." My jaw tightened. This wasn't a casual request. It was an order, thinly disguised. They were finally taking an interest, but I had a terrible feeling it wasn't because they believed my unexplainable story. It felt more like they wanted to shut me up, or worse, to see if I was somehow involved. The thought was sickening. I drove to the station, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The small-town police station felt different now, more serious, more ominous. Sheriff Thompson met me in his office. There was another man there, a stern-looking man in a dark suit who introduced himself only as Agent Miller. He didn't offer a handshake. "Mr. Smith," Agent Miller began, his voice calm but firm, "Sheriff Thompson mentioned you have a rather extensive surveillance setup, and that you made some unusual claims about what you observed." I placed my external hard drive on his desk. "I have everything here. Every hour of footage from the past month, and the clip I mentioned." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the blurry, distorted frames of the impossible figure. Agent Miller's expression remained unreadable. Sheriff Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at me every now and then. When the clip ended, Agent Miller leaned back. "And you believe this static is connected to the incidents?" "It's not static," I insisted. "It's a form, something moving, too fast to be clearly seen, but it's there. And it appeared just hours before Patricia Harris' house was attacked, very close to where I saw it on my property line." Agent Miller steepled his fingers. "Interesting. And you've never seen anything like this before?" "Never. Not in 20 years living here. But the attacks are escalating. The latest one, Robert Jones, his door was ripped off. The description he gave of a faint scratching, it matches what I saw in that flicker of distortion. Like long, hard claws." Agent Miller's eyes narrowed. "And you mentioned to Officer Davis that you saw an unexplainable phenomenon. Did you mention this to anyone else?" "I tried to tell the WA," I admitted. "They laughed at me. They thought I was crazy." "Good," he said, a surprising, cold little smile playing on his lips. "It's important that this information remains contained. For public safety." He paused, then his gaze fixed on me, intense and unsettling. "Mr. Smith, this footage, we'll need to keep it, for further analysis." "My property's been under surveillance, too," I blurted out, unable to hold it back. "A black SUV, it parked outside my house right after Officer Davis left. And I saw the same kind of distortion near it. Are you monitoring me?" Sheriff Thompson looked genuinely surprised, but Agent Miller just maintained his unnerving stare. "We monitor a lot of things, Mr. Smith," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's standard procedure in high-profile cases. We need to ensure all variables are accounted for. And you, with your elaborate system and unique observations, are a variable." He pushed the hard drive across the table towards himself. "We appreciate your cooperation. Do not discuss what you've seen or what you've shared with us with anyone else. For your own safety, and for the safety of the community." I stood there, a terrible understanding dawning on me. They weren't just skeptical. They knew. They already knew about this thing, whatever it was, and they wanted to control the narrative. They wanted to control me. My hard drive was gone, and with it my proof. I was on my own, and now I was in deeper than I ever could have imagined. What was more terrifying? The creature in the woods, or the people who seemed to be hiding it? The drive home from the police station was a blur. My mind was reeling. Agent Miller's cold demeanor, his veiled threats, the way he just took my hard drive, it all screamed one thing: cover-up. They weren't investigating, they were managing the public, managing the flow of information, and now managing me. The creature in the woods was one threat, but the one wearing a suit and sitting in a government office felt far more insidious. I was alone, stripped of my proof, and now I was a marked man. Panic began to set in, a cold, cloying dread that settled in my bones. What if they knew exactly what I was seeing on those cameras? What if they were connected to it? The thought was absurd. But in that moment nothing felt absurd anymore. I parked my truck, the tires crunching on the gravel, and slammed the door shut, locking it quickly. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist. Every bustle of leaves sounded like approaching footsteps. My own house, once a fortress, now felt like a cage. I went straight to my monitor wall. Without the hard drive I couldn't review the past footage, but the live feeds were still active. I stared at the screens, my eyes darting from one view to another. The woods, the driveway, the edges of my property. Nothing, just the familiar mundane silence. But the silence felt heavy, pregnant with unseen horrors. My hands shook as I grabbed a hunting rifle from the safe. It felt heavy, cold, and utterly inadequate against whatever was out there. Hours passed. The sun began to set, painting the sky in violent hues of orange and red that seemed to mock the growing darkness in my mind. The neighborhood went quiet earlier than usual. No kids playing, no dogs barking, just the distant hum of air conditioners and the crickets starting their nightly chorus. Then a sudden, piercing scream tore through the stillness. It came from the direction of the WA, a woman's voice cut short by a guttural roar that was definitely not human, not animal, My blood ran cold. I ran to the window, peering through the blinds. Nothing. The screens on my monitor wall showed only the tree line, dark and impenetrable. But I knew. Another one was gone. The creature was here, closer than ever. Suddenly, one of my outdoor cameras, the one pointed directly at the path leading from the deep woods to my backyard, flickered. Not static this time, but a complete blackout. My heart leapt into my throat. The redundant systems, the battery backups, they should have kept it running. This wasn't a glitch. This was targeted. It was here. It was on my property. I fumbled with the rifle, my hands slick with sweat. I could hear it now. A faint scraping, like something dragging long, sharp talons across rough bark, coming from the side of my house, moving towards the back. My breath hitched. I knew that sound. It was the same one Robert Jones had described. I backed away from the window, pressing myself against the wall, trying to control my ragged breathing. It was circling, testing. It knew I was inside. It knew I was watching. Then came the impact. Not a crash, not a bang, but a sickening thud against the back wall of my house near the kitchen, followed by another and another, rhythmic and powerful, shaking the very foundations. It was trying to get in, trying to rip its way through the wood. I raised the rifle, aiming it vaguely at the wall, my finger hovering over the trigger. What was I supposed to shoot? A shadow, a distortion. My mind screamed for answers, but there were none. Suddenly, a different camera feed. The one looking at my front door went black. Then another pointed at my garage. It was systematic. It was taking out my eyes one by one. I was blind. The thudding stopped. A new sound replaced it. A low, raspy breathing just outside my back door. It sounded immense, but utterly silent in its movements. My skin crawled. I could almost feel its presence right there waiting. I crept towards the kitchen, my rifle held tight. The back door was thick, reinforced, but I knew it wouldn't hold forever. As I got closer, a sliver of light from the outside porch lamp filtered under the door. And then a shadow. Not a normal shadow. One that was impossibly long, with sharp, jagged edges that shifted and writhed. It was reaching, probing underneath the door. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. This wasn't just physical. This was something else. I could feel its presence pressing against the door. A cold, hungry malevolence. Then a voice, not a human voice. A dry, rustling sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement, but it formed words in my head. "We know you see us, we know you know." I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, landing hard on the wooden floor. It wasn't speaking with sound, it was speaking directly into my mind. The horror was overwhelming. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror. This wasn't a killer. This was something beyond comprehension. Something ancient. Something that knew. The back door suddenly shuddered, splintering loudly. A long, impossibly thin claw, black and glistening, pierced through the wood inches from where I lay. It twitched. Testing the air, I scrambled back, desperate, my mind screaming. This was it. This was the end. My rational world had been ripped apart, and in its place was only madness. Then the piercing wail of a police siren, closer than before, followed by another, and another. The entire street suddenly lit up with flashing red and blue lights. I stared at the back door, the claw still twitching. The rustling voice in my head changed, a low hiss of frustration. "They are coming." The claw retracted. The thudding and scratching sounds resumed, but this time they were moving away, back towards the woods, rapidly fading. I lay there, shaking, tears streaming down my face, the rifle forgotten beside me. I was alive, for now. But the house was damaged, my mind shattered, and I knew with absolute certainty that it would be back. It knew me. And they, the people in the black suits, they knew it knew me. Just as the first officers burst through my front door, guns drawn, I heard one final, chilling whisper in my mind, a dry, triumphant chuckle that echoed in the dark corners of my skull. "It was never about the woods, John." And then everything went black. Not the camera feeds, but my own consciousness. When I came to, I was in a sterile white room, strapped to a bed. An IV drip was in my arm. The doctor, his face grim, was leaning over me. "He's awake," he said to someone I couldn't see. My head throbbed and my mouth was dry. I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. I tried to move, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Then Agent Miller's face appeared above me, looking down with that same cold, unreadable expression. "Welcome back, Mr. Smith," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "We told you to keep quiet. We warned you. Now you've become a liability, a very significant variable." He paused, a cruel smile forming. "The creature, the attacks, they were just a test for you. You saw too much, you knew too much, and now you'll understand everything." He gestured, and a nurse injected something into my IV. My vision blurred, a sense of crushing despair settled over me. This wasn't a hospital, this was a prison. And the monsters weren't just in the woods anymore, they were everywhere. And I was completely, utterly, and irrevocably broken.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share.